Hi everyone, I'm Gary Null and I'd like to welcome you to this program. We challenge thought, we challenge beliefs. We try to ask people to take a step back and to get a different perspective for a moment to see if that perspective will be able to change the reality. Normally we do it on health and nutrition and the thought process and the environment. Today we are going to be continuing with the series that I started many years ago, and every so often, hopefully about once every few weeks, I'm doing a more intensive discussion called Conversations with Remarkable People. In this series I've had Dr. Linus Pauling, I've had people like Ashley Montague and Buckminster Fuller, George Borgstrom, Pearl Buck, Norman Mailer, people who can think. And because of their unique sense of autonomy, they share insights that allow us to grow if we choose to. Today, we will continue in that vein. My guest is Professor Ervin Laszlo, and we're going to let you know about the integral theory of everything. Nice to have you with us.
Wonderful to be here, Gary. It's a delight.
I want to start with, I always like to start all my questions as stories. And as such, it gives you a lot of area to offer your own insights. And I then like to stay quiet. I don't do a chit-chat show, as you know, having been on it many times. I believe that it's too important a forum. Let people really roll their thoughts. So here is mine to begin this. Some time ago, I bought a home upstate New York. And it was the first home I could afford. But of all the different places I looked at, this would have been seemingly the least of an advantage to me. It was very densely wooded. There was no real sunlight as it was at the bottom of this valley. And yet I felt something there. I just felt that this is where I belonged at that point in my life. Only after I had purchased the property, and about a year later, as I'm in the woods, I noticed that there were all kinds of rocks in the formations. And it turns out, when I started doing the history of that area, that this was a sacred place where the Native Americans had lived, and they had their healing ceremonies there. Jump ahead 15 years. I bought a place in New Jersey on Lake Apacon, the oldest home on Lake Apacon, set up on a 2.5 acres, beautiful house. But it wasn't a house that, it was the feeling I had being there. And then it turns out, when I went into the history of that also had been used by Native Americans for ceremonies. Then the same thing in Texas. Can we still be holding the memory of everything in the universe through our subconscious at this moment? The forum is yours.
Gary, what you recount is very similar to my experience. But before getting to experience, let me say the question that you raised, the answer is very simply yes. I think what you're describing is attunement to information that is there in nature, that is recording everything that is happening, which is very much like the ancient Eastern notion of the Akasha, what talks about the Akashic record. That is a record of everything that ever happened in the universe. And it's something that you can sense, you can tune into. Before I get into this, let me just tell you very briefly. I didn't know about your experience until just now that you told me, but it's strikingly similar to one of mine. The house I live in now is in Tuscany, in Italy. I bought it in the winter of 72, 73. I saw it on top of a hill. It was completely overgrown with grass, one could hardly get to it. The roof was fallen in, and it was an abandoned house. My family, some people, friends who were with me, said, "What do you want here?" I got out of the car, which first of all wanted to drive up there. I got out of the car and I said, "Here is where I'd like to live." People said I'm crazy. I bought the house very, very quickly. Nobody thought that anybody would be interested in it. Fortunately, you might say now that I got it for a song. Now it was we were so fortunate because it's near the sea in Tuscany, in a beautiful area. But this was near a village, a very small, sleepy village that at that time was not known for anything. Now it's producing wine and it's known for that. I bought the house. over the years, I have reconstructed it. It turned out, just like it turned out many things by your place, that it was a sacred place because 400 years ago, this house was a chapel. And the chapel was built on foundations of previous buildings that we don't know what they were. But what we do know is that this was an area where the Etruscans lived. The Etruscans are a folk that predates the Romans on the Italian peninsula. When the Romans came in, after a few centuries, the Etruscans ceased to be evident somehow. We don't know. They were absorbed by the much more powerful, much more dominant Roman culture. The Etruscans were remarkable, peaceful people, very egalitarian men and women. And they apparently they had a sacred place next to the sea, over a river, on top of this hill. And that's somehow what I felt. Just one more thing to add to this. What I felt was an expression of peace and attunement. And the experience I've had after I bought the house, that whenever I was there, and at the beginning I was teaching in the United States, and I went there for summers and sometimes for a winter holiday. Whenever I was there, people would come from the village, and they would say, I used to come here, because this is the place of peace. In Italian it says pace, peace. They always used to come and say, che pace, what peace here. So this intuition, I never regretted it, because I have rebuilt the house, we kept the structure. It has something magical to it, and I feel it confirms something that I have since then been researching and writing on, at the fact that one can sense affinities with nature just the same way with other people, with the whole cosmos, if you like. And if one acts on it, if one has truly this sense, if one doesn't repress it, as one so often does in the West, then it can have some wonderful consequences, as they had for you, as they're having for me.
I believe that we are all connected, and that once we recognize the connection, as long as we do not interfere in the natural capacity to align ourselves with other energies, that there is almost a perfect harmony that can occur. That the conditioned mind, however, interferes in the process. It blocks us. Rich, poor, black, white, religious, 1,000 different ways that we have been taught and conditioned to alienate ourselves from the natural affinity of being able to associate. And if you come to anything I ever do, any lecture, and I've done 5 lectures or premieres in the last 7 days, they're all the same. There's a complete homogeneous group of blacks and Latinos and Caucasians and old and young and everyone, all walks of life, every economic scale, and there's a sense of they don't have to feel alienated. There's a sense of inclusion, and I believe the universal consciousness is one of inclusion. And when we don't feel included, when we feel isolated, and by isolation frequently lonely and depressed and anxious and fearful of the loss of having that connection. And I believe one of the reasons as a society, as individuals, we feel so depressed is because we're always seeking that connection that is inherent in all, but now we feel orphaned or abandoned from it because of the separations. Your thoughts?
Gary, I would like to suggest a kind of flip of our ordinary, normal, modern worldview. The modern worldview says that we are really separate. I'm here, you are there. I'm bounded by my skin. And this is where I end, basically. I don't believe other species have any concept, they don't have a concept, but they didn't have any suspicion. They would even dream of thinking that they end exactly where they are. They feel and they act in oneness with their environment. Many of the things that we call instincts, inborn behaviors, is something that comes to them because they are not one. They were not born fresh. When they were born, they inherited a lot of this information, and they can pick up this information, these energy fields. They are one with them. Traditional people, whether you talk about the African Bushmen, the Australian Aborigines, or whoever else, now they're getting fewer and fewer on this earth, but who still have the traditional culture. they have this ability to sense the connection and act on it. Anthropologists tell us that, for example, when in an Aboriginal family in Australia, something dramatic happens. A woman gives birth to a child, a fire breaks out, or something unusual happens. And the man is outside on the field, could be kilometers or miles away. That person senses that there is something happening there and is going to return as soon as he can. And this has been recorded over and over again. So what we call telepathy, that we can sometimes call twin pain, where one twin picks up the pain or something happening to the other. When a mother feels that something is happening to her son, who could be in a war someplace on the other side of the world, or just having an accident down the street, wherever, it doesn't make any difference so far. All of these things show us that we can sense the connection with each other, that we are connected, and that exceptionally for the past 250 years, we have got it into our heads in the Western world that all of reality is local. It's just matter moving in space and time. And this matter is only connected by sort of external relationship, cause and effect, like a billiard ball pushing another one. And there is no really deeper connection between things. None of the other cultures believe this. The other cultures are set up on this deeper knowledge. All spirituality is based on it. I think the origins of Western religions have the same deep sense of connection with each other, with Jesus, with the Holy Trinity, with God. We're trying to reestablish it through prayer. Many cultures do it through meditations. So it's always there. But the modern person on the street today believes that this is bunk, this doesn't really happen. And it's time to overcome this. And I'm hoping that through the research that I've done there by trying to connect this sense of oneness with the new physics, because people believe that, you know, in the physics,
string theory,
string theory, and also the general relativity, the unified theories, so-called the grand unified theories, all of these show that what is happening at one point affects what is happening at other points.
Don Imus said, "I'm a good person who made a stupid statement. There are people who will steal from me but not from you. Someone who will lie to you but not to me. Someone who will betray both of us but not someone else." Now the question is, if someone steals from me and not you, are they a thief? If they lie to you and not to me, are they a liar? If they betray both of us but not someone else, are they a betrayer? It depends upon how they're interpreting their own reality. And we are manifestations of millions of forms of energy waves that hit us. And we're overstimulated by energies outside. And one of the things that people who have been wise enough throughout history have done is they've removed themselves from the overstimulation of excessive inputs, both subtle and dominant, to retreats. They have meditated. Historically, they would go to a monastery, or they would go to a temple, or they would go into nature. And I've been in the Amazon rainforest where shamans will retreat, even from the small, family group they have, where they can go into themselves and disconnect from any excess stimulation and hence distraction, to recalibrate, in effect, fine-tune, much like a tuner of a piano. You can have a great piano, a Steinway, 1924, and if it gets out of tune, the best musician in the world playing an out-of-tune piano doesn't harmonize. So you have to have multiple energies all in alignment at the same time for something to really create a message, and the message is carried in the energy. Messages don't exist without energy. If I put in my computer right now, if I turn it off, the image stops. I turn it on, the image comes through. But if you were to open up the cable wire, and look at it, you'd say, well, these are just wires. And if you didn't have a way of a transponder that converts the energy into a message, how would you know? Well, who converts our messages? And the key is we have not gone to that place where people during deeper meditation go and ask, who converts the messages in the energy that creates the interpretation of my realities? And we all have multiple realities. So hence Don Imus could be a man who raised $100 million for charity for children, who took terminally ill kids of different diseases to his ranch out in New Mexico and gave them free food and medical services and a holistic perspective out there, because his wife's very much into that. And at the same time, those are harmonized for a good. Comes back in and makes money to support that, where demeaning humor is used, and those messages and the harmony of that are going to resonate with everyone who is on the same wavelength.
Ideal, of course, if you find a beautiful spot in the country where you can get out. You enter into it, and your brain becomes a receiver of information that is far more open to a broadband, to diverse forms of information than your everyday brain. The everyday brain in the so-called delta wavelengths is only limited to a certain small range of information. When you go down into this alpha lengths or theta lengths wave bands, then the brain becomes a receiver of information, of energy. And information is together, but where the information component is very significant. And you can pick up information of the kind that you picked up when you chose your house, when I chose my house. You know, when you find another person and you say, I can work with this person or not. Women are more open to this very often. Women very often will say, okay, this could be a good collaborator, not to mention having a good spouse or a good companion or a good husband. For men, very often we just look at externalities, but one can go deeper down and one can get this kind of information about everything and anything that happens in the world. The brain is actually a very, very sophisticated receiver and transmitter of information. We only use a very small part of it. If you learn to use more of it, then we could attune ourselves much more to the world around us. I think we become a better person because we all of a sudden develop much more solidarity, much more empathy with others, with nature, and with other people around us.
Very nice point. Thank you for sharing that.